A quick disclaimer before we begin. The PEMF podcast does not contain any medical advice, and the content provided is for informational purposes only. If you have any health concerns, please visit a healthcare professional. Welcome back to the PEMF podcast. Today we're talking about a condition that has a huge impact on families all over the world. Alzheimer's. If you've ever known someone living with memory loss or cognitive decline, you'll know how tough it can be, both for them and for the people around them. In this episode, we're going to look into where PEMF could fit into the wider conversation on brain health and treatment of Alzheimer's.
So today we're going to look at the science, the studies, and some practical ways that PEMF can be used in a brain support kind of toolkit. But I think a good place to start with this would to be just to describe what actually is Alzheimer's.
Yeah, sure. So Alzheimer's is the most common form of dementia, and it's predicted to affect 1 in 85 people globally by 2050. But first, let's just try and clear it up. Dementia is the umbrella term. It describes the overall set of symptoms like memory loss, confusion, or change in behaviour. Alzheimer's is one specific disease that falls under that umbrella, and it's the one that most people are familiar with, I would assume. So what that actually happens in Alzheimer's disease over time is proteins start to build up in the brain. These proteins are called Beta-Amyloid plaques and tau tangles. This build-up gets in the way of how brain cells communicate with each other, and eventually it causes those cells to die. What it leads to is the symptoms that we see, like memory loss, confusion, difficulty with problem solving, and changing in mood or personality. And as it progresses, those symptoms become more severe, eventually affecting someone's ability to live independently.
Yeah, for sure. Over time, it can really have some kind of severe effects on someone's quality of life. But at the moment, what are the current kind of treatment methods or current treatments that are out there for Alzheimer's?
Right now, conventional treatments focus mostly on managing symptoms and slowing progression. So there's medications such as cholinesterase inhibitors and memantine, which can help improve communication between brain cells. There are also new drugs in development aimed at reducing amyloid plaques. So as well as obviously lifestyle factors like regular exercise, brain training, healthy diet, sleep, and social engagement are also really, really important. But because outcomes really vary, people are increasingly looking at complementary approaches, which brings us to PEMF.
And yeah, for anyone who hasn't actually heard of PEMF, and this might be their first time, what is it just in 30 seconds?
Yeah, so just in summary, PEMF therapy, which stands for pulsed electromagnetic field therapy, is a non-invasive, drug-free and natural treatment that uses pulsed electromagnetic fields to stimulate the body's natural healing processes to create the optimal environment to heal.
Great. So you said that some of the main causes of Alzheimer's are the beta-amyloid plaques buildup, as well as the tau tangles. So are there any kind of studies to show PEMF to reduce these?
Yes, there's a really interesting study that investigated this. So instead of just focusing on symptoms, the researchers wanted to see if PEMF could actually affect Alzheimer's at the genetic level. They focused on something called microRNAs. These are tiny molecules inside our cells that act like switches, turning certain genes on or off. And in Alzheimer's, a lot of these switches are disrupted, which makes the disease a lot worse. The team took blood immune cells from 13 people with Alzheimer's and exposed them to a low-frequency PEMF at about 30 Gauss and 75 Hertz for different lengths of time, between 15 and 60 minutes. They then measured how 3 microRNAs changed. The second microRNA, MIR3355P, is linked to memory and learning because it influences synaptic plasticity, which is the brain's ability to form new connections. PEMF increased this marker at first, but the effects changed with longer exposure, showing that timing really is important. In fact, after 15 minutes, the levels went up, but at the 30 and the 60-minute stage, that boost didn't continue. The levels actually slightly dropped down a bit, meaning that the effect was less beneficial with longer exposure. The third MIR26B5P is connected to glutamate, a key brain chemical for communication. Too much glutamate can damage brain cells. With PEMF, this microRNA dropped with longer exposure, which might help keep glutamate levels balanced and protect neurons. So the big takeaway in all of this, PEMF did change the genetic regulators involved in Alzheimer's, especially by reducing the activity of BACE1, the enzyme behind amyloid plaque buildup. It's not really that simple, but some of the effects were really helpful. Others depended on how long the cells are exposed, but it shows PEMF could work much deeper in the body than we once thought, right down to the switches that control our genes.
It's really interesting that the actual longer sessions seem to have less effects in certain areas. It might kind of show that there is kind of a biphasic dose response with PEMF, and that might actually cross quite a lot of different areas. It might be something that might need to be looked at a little bit harder or a little bit more when it comes to PEMF. But kind of looking at some more studies, were there any more studies that actually showed PEMF to kind of reduce that brain plaque?
Yeah, another study from 2004 looked at the effects of low frequency, low energy PEMF on two key types of brain cells: neurons, the main signaling cells, and microglia, the brain's immune cells, both of which play a central role in Alzheimer's disease. The researchers wanted to see whether PEMF could protect these cells when exposed to damaging agents like hydrogen peroxide, which essentially generates oxidative stress, and amyloid beta peptide, the toxic protein fragment that forms plaques in Alzheimer's. They used human SH-SY5Y neuronal cells and N9 mitochondrial cells, exposing them to 75 Hz. The key outcomes they wanted to measure were oxidative stress, mitochondrial health, and cell survival. In neurons, amyloid beta and hydrogen peroxide both caused a big spike in reactive oxygen species, which is ROS, damaging molecules that attack proteins, DNA and lipids. Continuous PEMF exposure significantly reduced this oxidative stress and also helped to preserve mitochondrial function. Since mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell, as they say, protecting them is a crucial part for keeping neurons alive. In microglia, amyloid beta and inflammatory triggers caused similar mitochondrial damage and oxidative stress. Once again, PEMF reduced ROS production, helped restore mitochondrial potential, and reduced cell death. This is essentially important because microglia can be a double-edged sword in Alzheimer's. If they survive in a healthy state, they can clear plaques, but if they die, they become overactivated and they drive inflammation.
Yeah, that's great. There was actually something as well that was kind of interesting for this study as well, wasn't there?
Yeah, interestingly, the team also found that PEMF alone seemed to have a pro-survival effect in neurons, increasing visibility even in the absence of the injury. The protective effect was linked to pathways involving ERK, phosphorylation, a stress-activated signaling route. PEMF appeared to reduce the overactivation, which may be one way to help cells resist damage. Overall, the results suggest that low-frequency PEMF can defend both neurons and microglia against oxidative stress and mitochondrial dysfunction triggered by amyloid beta. Since oxidative stress and mitochondrial collapse are thought to be early drivers of Alzheimer progression, these findings point to PEMF as a potential tool to slow or protect against cellular damage in the disease.
Hopefully they can actually start to find out what some of these mechanisms are and how they actually work with some more research in the future. But was there any kind of other noteworthy studies on Alzheimer's?
Yeah, so the last study showed PEMF can protect both neurons and microglia from oxidative stress and mitochondrial collapse, which are some of the most earlier drivers of Alzheimer's. But researchers didn't stop there. Another recent paper can ask basically, can PEMF not only protect brain cells from damage, but also actually reactivate some of the brain's natural survival and repair pathways. To test this, they used a model of neuron-like PC12 cells that have been injured with hydrogen peroxide or amyloid beta. Again, both are key stressors in Alzheimer's. What they found was that PEMF didn't just reduce oxidative stress and prevent cell death, it also restored mitochondrial membrane potential, reduced caspase-3 activation, which is one of the enzymes that drives programmed cells death. And crucially, it can reactivate the CAMP, CREB, BDNF signaling pathway. This pathway is essential to learning, memory, and neuroplasticity, but it normally gets shut down after Alzheimer's like stress. But switching it back on, PEMF helped boost levels of BDNF, a growth factor that supports synapsis and keeps neurons resilient. So the message here is that PEMF might not only act as a shield against damage, but also as a kind of switch to turn on the brain's natural self-repair systems.
Yeah, that's a really great collection of studies we've got there. And it's worth mentioning that there was a really good one as well that used PEMF, but with radio frequencies, which I'll link below with all the other studies. And while you're down there as well, there is our Instagram where we've summarized a whole load of summaries about PEMF across a whole range of conditions. Definitely worth checking out if you are interested. But there are kind of like a list of almost general kind of benefits that PEMF can kind of give you. Do these kind of general list of benefits kind of help with Alzheimer's as well?
Yeah, even if we put the Alzheimer's specific studies to one side, we already know that PEMF has some general benefits that could be really relevant for just the brain health. For example, one of the big ones is circulation. PEMF has been shown in multiple studies to improve blood flow and microcirculation. In Alzheimer's, blood supply to the brain is often reduced. So anything that helps oxygen and nutrients reach brain cells could be really supportive. Then there's inflammation. Chronic inflammation in the brain is thought to speed up the progression of Alzheimer's. PEMF is well documented in anti-inflammatory effects and other contexts. So the same principle could apply here. Calming things down and reducing stress on neurons. Another area is cellular energy. The brain is incredibly energy hungry, and problems with mitochondria are common in Alzheimer's. PEMF is known to boost mitochondrial function and boost ATP production by up to 400%, which may help brain cells stay more resilient. And finally, there's sleep and stress regulation. Poor sleep and chronic stress both make cognitive decline worse, and PEMF is often used to help with relaxation, sleep quality, and balancing the nervous system. So while the direct Alzheimer's research is still early, the broader effects we already see from PEMF line up nicely with some of the major challenges in Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah, so many of the currently known kind of foundational benefits as such of PEMF could actually help with Alzheimer's. But is PEMF maybe a better preventive or supportive therapy for Alzheimer's?
Most of the Alzheimer's research so far points towards a preventative approach. The studies in cells and animals show that PEMF works best when it's applied daily over time, helping to counteract the processes that drive the disease, like amyloid buildup, oxidative stress, mitochondrial dysfunction, and disrupted signaling. For example, in the radio frequency study, repeated 1-hour sessions over 2 weeks significantly reduced amyloid beta levels. The second and third studies also showed that daily use protected neurons and microglia from damage and even reactivated repair pathways like CREB and BDNF. That said, there's also a case for supportive use. In the cell studies, PEMF didn't just slow down damage, it also helped cells to recover after being exposed to toxic triggers like hydrogen peroxide or amyloid beta. That means PEMF may help value even once symptoms are present by helping to stabilize mitochondria, reduce oxidative stress, and support survival pathways. So while prevention seems strongest in the data, a supportive role alongside other therapies is also a realistic possibility.
Okay, great. So now someone might be thinking, right, I want to use PEMF for Alzheimer's. How long should they be kind of using it for?
So the research isn't fully standardized yet, but there are some clear patterns. In the amyloid reduction studies, cells were exposed to around 1 hour daily over 14 to 21 days before results became significant. In the microglia and neuron protection studies, exposures range from 30 to 90 minutes per day. Another 2024 study looked at CREB and BDNF signaling, also used continuous exposures in the same window. So the common thread really here is regular daily sessions of 30 to 60 minutes, often over several weeks. And importantly, these effects didn't come from one-off exposures. They're accumulated over time, showing that consistency really is key with PEMFs.
And yeah, that kind of really applies for anything when it comes to PEMF. Consistency is kind of key. But for Alzheimer's, how should people apply it?
Yeah, so in the laboratory settings, like we've seen in most of the studies we've covered today, researchers expose brain cells directly in culture dishes or use whole body exposure for animals. For people, PEMF can be applied either locally via a localized applicator or via a full body PEMF mat. We would always recommend a 2-in-1 device, which has both types of application, as this gives you maximum versatility, and really PEMF is most powerful when it's experienced across the entire body, because the human body is holistic and interconnected from head to toe. 5 major systems including circulatory, lymphatic, nervous, connective tissue, and the meridian, which is the premovascular link every cell, tissue, and organ into a single dynamic network. To fully energize these systems, you need a wide coverage and a deep penetration of a full body mat. This way, all 37 trillion cells in the body receive the benefits of the PEMFs, not just the ones near the local applicator. The local applicator can come in handy when it comes to targeting and intensifying PEMFs in a specific area. Or if it's rechargeable, it means you could use it on the go to help you while you get on with your day.
So looking at this now, what kind of device would you then recommend for Alzheimer's?
As we just mentioned, I'd look for a 2-in-1 device that offers localized and full body application for maximum versatility. A medium to low intensity device will be optimal, as that like 1 to 100 Gauss range. Firstly, as you're likely going to be intensifying the PEMF over the head, you want the device to be that level of intense. Secondly, the research all used medium to low intensity around 15 to 30 Gauss, showing that there is no need to go for super high intensity when it comes to Alzheimer's. All the studies we referenced used a low frequency of around 75 Hertz or below. But that doesn't necessarily mean other frequency wouldn't be effective. It just reflects where the research have started, not the full picture, which, might work best.
Yeah, for sure. So 2-in-1, medium to low intensity, and kind of has that natural kind of frequency range, probably 1 to 100. So you've got that 75 in there if you obviously want to use that as well. But say someone now kind of wants to track their progress when it comes to Alzheimer's. How would they do this with like a PEMF device or like a tracking kind of system?
Yeah, it's a great question, because if someone wants to track progress with PEMF for Alzheimer's, the best way really is to keep things simple, is what I would say, but always be consistent. So because we're looking at memory issues that are involved, usually it makes sense for a family member or caregiver to help with the tracking. Instead of focusing on pain like we would with like migraines, for example, you'd look at things like daily mood, sleep quality, alertness, and how engaged someone seems in a conversation or activities that day. You can also note memory-related changes, for example, how often they remember names, whether they follow routines more easily, or if they seem less confused at certain times of day. Some families use structured tools like the mini mental state examination or the Alzheimer's disease assessment scale. But honestly, I just sometimes feel that these can be a little bit clinical. A simple daily or weekly log works just as well. Write down a few key observations: energy levels, mood, memory lapses, independence with tasks like dressing or eating. The important thing is to start a couple of weeks before PEMF so that you've got a baseline to work with too. Then you need to keep tracking over time. That way you can see whether these are shifts, even small ones, like better sleep, fewer restless nights, or more moments of clarity and connection. Those little changes are often what families notice first, and having them written down makes it easier to see the bigger picture.
For sure, and it's definitely worth doing. As you say, some of the times the improvements could be subtle, but obviously they might compound over time and you might not notice them necessarily at the start, but after a few months you might think, it hasn't changed, but you look back at the log and you go, wow, there's a big difference between month 1 and month 3, for example. But if you want to check out any of these studies though, I'll link them below this episode, or if you go check out our Instagram, they'll all be on there, along with loads of other studies, loads of other PEMF related content that'll be worth checking out. But while you're down there, make sure to leave us a 5-star review on whatever audio platform you're listening from, or like or subscribe if you're on YouTube. It really just helps us make more and more of these episodes.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the PEMF podcast.